Salam and welcome back, everybody, to our podcast, Unapologetic, the Third Narrative.
Our original and authentic initiative in light of the war in Israel and Gaza.
A platform where we will share our identities, views, and experience from the ground. We start our podcast today on a different note. We all woke up with even heavier hearts today to the devastating news of the death of Vivian Silver, a friend to many peace activists, a well-known figure from Kibbutz Be'eri, and it's just devastating. I don't know how to say it in any other words.
Yeah, she was a friend and I think a leader and a role model to a lot of the peace activists, especially if we look at our generation, the younger generation. There's a lot to learn from what Vivian did throughout the years. For those who don't know, Vivian is one of the founding members of Women Wage Peace, and she personally took people from inside Gaza with her private car in the past to Israel to provide people with medical care for those who needed medical care inside Israel because, the medical attention wasn't good enough in Gaza for certain people. And she walked the walk. I think that's what I feel that she did. She walked the walk. She didn't just talk about peace. She actively worked for it. And, for the past, a month now, everybody thought that she was one of the kidnapped.
And even her own son was advocating for a solution. It was very similar to the voice and terminology and language that we use. And now we wake up to the identification of her body as one of the people that were murdered on the 7th of October.
And, thinking about why it's been only published now, it's what it looks like. We can't fully confirm yet, but what it looks like that she could have been one of the people who are actually burned and set on fire. And, getting goosebumps just to talk about it, but it's probably, it took so long because they needed to identify the body and the DNA. And that's what's happening to a lot of these cases they're just realizing now that, a person was killed. And I heard her friend talk on the interview this morning.
Yeah.
And she was saying how they were all kind of hopeful that if she was one of the kidnapped, maybe one of the, some of the people that she helped in Gaza would advocate for her.
Yeah.
Or the second one, and she said it with like a bit of a laugh, a sad laugh that, maybe she would have been there negotiating with Hamas and making negotiations between them and the kidnapped, and because she's
not far-fetched.
It's not far-fetched for her skills and what that woman is. That's not far-fetched at all. But unfortunately, we wake up to this devastating news, and it's every person who's an activist in this field, I think, feels that pain today.
And she's not the only one. We're talking about her right now, but she's not the only death. She's not the only person. Her family is not the only family that's suffering from this, from Palestine, from Israel. It's just like I also saw something posted today about her, that we talk about her not just as a peace activist. We talk about her as one of the humans, one of the lives that has been lost from this horrendous tragedy that we're in.
Absolutely. And we talk about how she led by example and all the amazing things that she did throughout her life. And I think it's a great way to discuss the camp that she worked for, the advocacy that she did, because she was one of the leaders of the peacebuilding camp, I would say, that was trying to advocate for a peace, a solution. But if we're looking at the war right now, and if we're looking at the situation in the past, you name the year, 30, 50, 80 years, the peace camp hasn't succeeded.
No.
We don't have peace. We still have wars, and we still have a war right now. So I think it's important because we want to talk about solutions. We want to bring solutions into the table. We want to discuss, what are the tangible things that we can do in order to see real change. Because in the last episode, we talked about the problems and how peace processes failed, how political processes failed. But before we talk even about the solutions, I think it's also important to underline the failures that we had in the peace building camp itself, not only from political figures, but also from people who actually did try and work towards peace, but things didn't work.
Yeah, and I think when we talked about things in the past and about historical and political events, we gave the disclaimer of us not being historians, not being diplomats. I'd like to resurface this disclaimer. Whenever we talk about something, we're going to talk about it from our eyes. We're going to talk about it through our experience, because we are people that not only work in the peace camp, but we're also people that started, or at least for me, started as participants, as the people that were targeted to participate in these kinds of programs, and in an attempt to bring people to advocate for peace.
And I had a very similar experience, also being one of the participants, one of the kids who were part of these programs that were done in the past. But let me ask you, let's start with, why didn't it work? I think, before we talk about the tactical aspect of why didn't it work, what did you feel when you were in these peace building projects as a participant? And what did you feel that was missing, that didn't really, achieve what you wanted it to achieve as a kid? In the eyes of you as a kid at that time, what did you feel that was missing?
First of all, it's a loaded question.
I know.
I can talk for days about how the peace camp is not, I don't want to go as far as saying does more harm than good, but it also contributes to the maintenance of, at least not, it doesn't contribute in the evolving of the people that are in it. What I experienced, and I'm not going to talk about it as me right now. What I experienced as a kid was that there were many peace organizations that I couldn't join for some reason. For some reason, before I even understood the objective. Like, I was a kid, and you see some prestigious program that you want to join, and you try your best, but sometimes odds aren't in your favor, and you see that as a kid as odds not being in your favor. But in retrospect, it's the lack of the understanding of the actual culture and community from the organizers themselves that actually sets these programs to not a full potential. Like, for example, I grew up in a conservative community. I went to an only girls school, and my parents were like, my upbringing was very traditional, very conservative, and when programs, I don't want to say names, but when programs come up and it's like an overnight thing, or it's a mixed program of not Arabs and Jews, but a mixed of female and male, when it's a program that's in the center, or a program that is in West Jerusalem and not East Jerusalem, in my where I'm standing or was standing. As a kid, even as an 18-year-old, like I assume there's a lot of Middle Eastern traditional people from traditional households that are watching this. It's not easy living in a traditional household. You need permission for everything, especially when it comes to something that's speculating, has some speculation around it.
So what was the failure? Was it basically because, so I can understand you,
it doesn't fit our community?
So how would it fit your community? Or what it exactly didn't fit? That it was, for instance, in Tel Aviv and your parents wouldn't want you to go to Tel Aviv? Is that what they were missing, that you need a place that your parents would also approve of, and they didn't understand that? Like, what exactly you felt that was that could have contributed to the success that wasn't?
It had
like you're saying,
yes,
you need permission, it's in the center, it's in West Jerusalem. So what would have worked for you as a kid? To do it in East Jerusalem?
Not just that. There's so many factors that are into play. Number one, work with people from that target audience that you want to attract. Like for me right now, because we're in the field that I'm working in, when I'm working with a target audience that's younger, I give a different kind of advice to the organizations that I work with. When it's a bigger, older target audience, I give different kind of advice. When it's professionals, if I'm dealing, like for example, with parents from the West Bank, you need to put into consideration who you're dealing with.
We need to cater it to the people.
Yes, like if I'm as an 18 year as a kid, a teenager from East Jerusalem, from a traditional household, regardless of the fact if it's Muslim or Christian, but Arab or Palestinian, I'm not going to be allowed, like the average household is not going to allow their daughter to join a program at, let's say, late at night. That doesn't have to do with school activities. Programs don't put that into consideration. Conservative households, which are the target that we want to get to, won't let their daughters or sometimes even their sons go to mixed events of males and females. Like they might disregard the Jewish Muslim or like they might disregard
Really?
the faith. Yes, they
That's
might
interesting.
disregard the faith before they disregard the male female.
But I think, what you're talking about is more prevalent to experience as someone of East Jerusalem in the West Bank rather than someone in the north of Israel, a Palestinian Israeli citizen. Issue of particularly male and female. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that women in the Palestinian Israelis, for them, women have they're equal on every measure. Not at all. Like we have racism, we have discrimination, we have sexism. That exists, but it's in less levels than East Jerusalem or the West Bank, particularly in the issue of boys and girls. Like, I don't know, I grew up in an environment where it was a given.
Your
Schools are mixed.
Our schools, the good schools, like if you went to a good education, you went to a separate only girls, only boys school.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to remember, I think we only had 2 schools in Nazareth when I grew up. That was one boys, one that was girl. No, there were a couple more actually, including the Christians one, but even them, most of them became mixed schools later on. Like during the early 2000s, I remember some of the schools who were only girls, they became mixed, and one for only boys. But the prevalent thing is mixed schools for us, not separated ones. And that's for me, it's like a different element, dynamic that I wouldn't think about. So how can we expect? And that's a real question. How do you expect, like you're saying, organizers to really hit the target audience and understand every single thing about their issue if they don't experience it?
Yeah.
For me, like if I'm with them, I could miss out on that it's an issue of boys and girls. Because for me, it's a given. And then I would miss on the element that's important for you, someone who's from East Jerusalem or West Bank. So how do we combat that?
Like I said, when you need someone on your team, at least one person that is that target audience that comes from there. That's what you need. Like if you're recruiting for a team, like let's say you have a certain program and you're recruiting for your team, it's very important to have a Palestinian. It's very important to have an Israeli, but it's even more important to have specifically the target audience that you're aiming to recruit to your program. Because you need to understand the difficulties and why you won't get those people before you actually attempt to get them.
And as peace activists, we've seen throughout the years the problem of recruitment of Palestinians to a lot of the peace building programs, and it's not because we don't want to participate in peace programs or we're less devoted to peace or something like that. It's because there's an inherent problem, I feel, in the programs. It's exactly what you're saying. From a traditional Palestinian family in the West Bank, if you're seeing the program and you're seeing that the entire management is Israeli, you'll be skeptical about what they actually want to get out of this program, about the actual goals that they want to achieve. Maybe it's Zionist goals. Maybe it's, only pro-Israeli goals. Maybe we're just playing the nice Arab or the nice Palestinian who's joining an Israeli group, and you don't want to be in that position. So when you see only Israeli in the recruitment aspect and the management, that's already a discouragement for a lot of Palestinians to participate. I think that's already from the get-go, it's like you're saying about set to fail. That creates a set for failure of getting enough Palestinians who would actually believe in what you're doing. And not only it comes to the issue, like you're saying, and the issue of understanding the culture or recruitment in terms of understanding what hours to do. I think the problem is that they don't look at things sometimes from our eyes. And even the most basic needs. And, like you're saying, it needs to be catered for both. And in order to be catered for both, you need an Israeli and a Palestinian who would bring those eyes that would, implement the program in a way that it will also coincide with the community that we're working with.
It also, I apply it like when I try to explain it, because it's a complete culture shock when I explain it to people on the Israeli side or the more liberal side, even if they're Arab. I compare, not to compare, but just to put the parallel example of if you're doing a program where you're recruiting Orthodox religious students. Would you go about it the same way as if you were recruiting people from the majority of, not majority, but recruiting people from the general Israeli public? No, you're going to have specific guidelines on how are you going to convince these Orthodox religious community to encourage their children to join your program. It's not like you need to get into the brains of the parents before you get into the brains of the kids.
Agree. And without the eyes of someone from the community, you can't really do that, can you? I remember, and I think there's another issue in that, is that maybe even when the programs are done with two sides, Arab and Jewish, sometimes it's still catered to be more to not meet the needs of our community. And I remember, for instance, from my own experience, I remember in the early 2000s, it was during right in the beginning of the Intifada, where there were attempts to maintain that thing that's called Oslo and working towards peace, and we're having programs of Arab and Jewish kids, and we were drawing doves in classes and stuff. And we did a program with a Jewish school in the north, where we visited them in their school, and then they came and visited us in ours. And it's like you say, set to fail. The first thing, even though it was our school, so we could do something in order to cater our needs, but already the system, I think that's even more problematic, is that the system itself sets us to fail, because we were in the 4th grade, I think.
Okay.
Back then, we and I mentioned it in the last episode, we start learning Hebrew early on. And back then, when I was a kid, we started doing the alphabet in 2nd grade. And it's mandatory, and by 4th grade, you're picking up a little bit more. But for somebody who never had any exposure, in 2nd grade, you only did letters. That's it. And then 3rd grade, a couple words, and then you're starting to form simple sentences. But when we met with that school, and the first meeting was in their school also, which is maybe also another part of the problem. Teller. We went to their school. And, they took a few of the kids, not everyone from my class, supposedly, ones who knew a bit, had higher grades in Hebrew. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we need to speak in Hebrew. That's the problem of the system that sets us to fail. Because we put these kids together, Arabs and Jews, but we're telling the Arab kids, you need to make the extra effort out of the two. Because the other kid will speak in his own language, but you need to speak in his in order to communicate. Now, that's a lot of pressure on a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
That you're telling him this is a new language, you barely can speak any word of it, but here's a Jewish kid, start talking to him. And I remember, almost all my classmates would come to me and ask me for a translation of words. Because at that time, I already spoke the language fluently.
Yeah.
And there was no communication between any of my classmates and their Jewish peers, because they set us, one Jewish kid with an Arab kid. And none of them were able to have real meaningful conversations, or almost any conversations at all. And our classmates felt the pressure. And that's already not fair, But because Hebrew is mandatory, Arabic is not. But if Arabic was mandatory, the same way Hebrew is mandatory for Arabs, if Arabic was mandatory for Jews, then we'll put in a scenario. You and I are there. I'll say a couple of words that I know in Hebrew, and you'll say a couple of words that you know in Arabic, and we'll figure it out. You know, we're two kids, innocent, know a couple of words here and there. We'll toss it to each other, and we'll have a conversation out of, you know, both of us making effort to make that communication. But you can't do it with putting one side, all the pressure is on him. You have to know the other person's language. It's already unfair, and it's already putting us in a place where we can't talk.
That's because we are expected to integrate, and the pressure is put on Arabs or Palestinians to integrate and not for the society to open up and bring in the Arabs. No, we're supposed to, like, little by little, blend in, become them, and then we'll be accepted.
Yeah, you know, there's one sentence that sometimes some people would say, and it already tells exactly what you're saying. Why? אתה לא נראה ערבי. Wow, really? You don't look Arab. As if they're giving you a compliment, for Christ's sake, you know? Like, that already shows the problem of it. That in order for you to fit in with the community, you're supposed to blend in with them, I don't know, visually, dress-wise. I'm not sure what's not Arab about me. I could look Moroccan. I can be Arab from here. I could be, you know, I can be very different things.
Come on, we all look like each other. Like, exactly. Are we kidding?
Like, what's Arab and what's Moroccan? Like, you know, Arab from here and Moroccan Jew almost look the same. Like, you can't really differentiate. So what do you want from me to look like in order to be more Israeli in your eye? It's something I still don't understand. What's for some people is Israeli enough.
Israeli enough.
What they feel is Israeli enough.
Yeah, I get I would have never guessed you were you were Arab. I would have never guessed you were Arab. But you know what's interesting is that you always talk about the same dynamic about the Hebrew and expecting, and I'll bring you another angle, the East Jerusalem angle, also the West Bank angle. We don't know Hebrew. It's also not mandatory for us to know Hebrew, and I say us as in East Jerusalem and West Bank. So the pressure is on the English. So all the programs coming from, funded from wherever, are how are we going to communicate in the English language? So
how does that work with Israeli kids?
Exactly.
No, seriously.
Exactly. You end up recruiting, and I'm generalizing, you end up recruiting the people that are already exposed to the broader scope. Like, if you're talking to someone who has the privilege of learning English, and I'm not saying someone who like grew up with English in the household. I'm saying to someone, if someone has the privilege to get a good education from both sides, from the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, to get a good education and to actually learn English in a communicative level, that means you're getting the people that are already like they're on the path, and you're neglecting the people that don't have those capabilities, they don't have the tools. So, and they like, programs don't just need to qualify to enter these programs. You don't just have to be good. You don't just have to know English. You need to be a good English speaker. Like, you need to understand. You need to be able to write, to talk. Like, it's not like you're taking a lecture and you understand. It's a lot of pressure. Wow. And some people, like some kids are like, I don't know English. Like, I have other things to do. So you're not just... like it just filters the people. Like you have, that's why there's something called double dipping in programs. If you go to a program in a specific, in an institution X, and then join a program in institution Y, I could say like 80% of the people are going to be in both programs. And that's a big problem.
And what you're mentioning is also opening another issue of that, is the echo chamber. Mm-hmm. It's not only in terms of education level. I think it's two things. It's the education, because of the, like, particularly also in the issue of language. But the other thing is to have very specific political views. Mm-hmm. I feel that's one of the biggest problems of the peace building work today. It's mainly in the left wing dynamics.
It's like you're talking to people who agree with you.
Exactly. And it's echo chamber. Like, we're talking, all of us that we all agree, we all talk together, we all have the same thoughts, maybe slightly different here and there, and that's it. Mm-hmm. but that's not the people I want to talk to.
Yeah.
Like, and if we look at the Israeli, particularly if we look at the Israeli society today, I'm sorry, the majority of the society is not left-wing.
Especially today.
And if you want to talk to the majority, you need to talk to what the majority is.
Yeah.
And you can't talk to the minority and say, well, we're talking to the Israelis. I'm sorry, you're not. You're talking to only a very specific group within the Israeli public. If you want to hit the masses, talk to the right wing. Talk to the prevalent views and try to expose them to yours and learn about theirs. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult because if you're going to talk to the mainstream, you're not going to hear the cozy, comfortable statements you hear from lefty Israeli. And
people aren't going to tiptoe.
Exactly. And it's the same vice versa. So it needs people who are able to not get offended.
Yeah.
To just listen to someone who that's their view, that's their rhetoric, that's their philosophy, ideology, belief, religion. You can't really, it's not something to argue with. And I think that's part of the problem of when we talk to the mainstream is because it doesn't sit with us, so we argue with it. And it doesn't work to argue with it because they have their own views, you have your own views. It's not going to work. The only thing you can do is show the other side that you're open to listen and you're open to absorb and learn about their view, and that will open their heart to listen to yours. When they see that you're accepting, they'll reciprocate, and they'll be a little bit more lenient to listen to what you have to say than to try to, show them that you are right and they're wrong. That's not going to work because there is no right and wrong. What we can do is expose each other to each other's views.
I'll give you a recent example of what I went through previously. And I know my friends that were in this example are going to listen to this. So shout out to them. I love them so much. But I agree with you 100% about being in a room with a bunch of, I don't even want to call them leftists, like being in the room with Israelis and Palestinians, people who more or less agree about what we're talking about. But at the same time, and I'm going to talk about the Palestinian side, because I feel it. What I'm going to present now is we're also silenced, not because of the current situation right now and how the media is being monitored, but we're also silenced because we're so afraid of being that crazy Palestinian, and we want to be that Arabi Tov, we want to be the good Arab, that we don't speak our mind. And how do we expect even the leftist in the room, and I'll give you the example in a second, even the leftist in a room to understand what we need when we don't actually say it. So in one of the programs that I was in, and these are people that I traveled together, and we're like close. And if it wasn't this much closeness, I wouldn't have the comfort to say this. So two people in this group, it was like an open discussion to talk about the current situation and how we're both feeling. It was all about feelings, and very leftist. And so people from the Israeli side were expressing how they're worried about their friends and loved ones that are in reserves. And that's how the call started. And my first reaction was like, how dare you?
Wait, that call is now? It was
Yes.
in this war?
Yes.
Okay.
And my first reaction was like, how insensitive. How could you say that to a bunch of Palestinians that are joining this call, Palestinians that have family members and friends that are dying, and you're talking about your friends and family that are in reserves? Are you serious? And then I was like, okay, like I took a step back, I took a breath, and I was like, this space is there for them to express this, because this is the reality that we are in. There's an extreme social pressure to be in reserves right now.
For some people, you have to.
For some people, you have to. And I'm not justifying it, but I can understand. So I took a step back and I was like, I can't expect her to understand if I don't say it. So I was like, I'm not going to be the only one that says, I'm going to try something. I'm going to do my own social experiment. And then I asked the Palestinian in the room, I was like, I'm going to put everyone on the spot, and I'm going to ask the Palestinians, how do you feel about, and this was after everyone talked, how do you feel about 1, 2, 3? And
about the feeling of reserves?
about the reserves.
Okay.
About that your partner in this peace building process is that they are talking about their loved ones being in reserves. And the answers that I got from each and every one, like they start with fluffiness and then it's like, I unfortunately can't comment. I'm too afraid of the current situation right now. I don't know what's monitored and what's not, and I'd rather keep it to myself. And then I expressed my feelings and I said, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to just give you a picture of how complicated where we are right now. Not just being Palestinian Israelis, because there were Jerusalemites and West Bankers on this call. As someone who woke up on the 7th of October, and one of the first videos that I saw was the wall coming down, and before any violence, just saw people coming out. There is no Palestinian on earth, and yes, I want to generalize, there's no Palestinian that doesn't want the wall gone and the freedom of the Palestinian people. That is a powerful feeling that I felt, and I didn't know what was happening. Everyone was in shock, but that feeling of wanting that barrier, that wall down, is there in each and every Palestinian's heart. And then I continued to say, but then I saw the horrors after that. And at the same time, I was praying for the Iron Dome to protect me from each and every rocket. So when you tell me about your loved one from reserves, that I want to say that triggers me. I understand the situation. I'm also in a complicated shit show, but I need you to say it. I need you to know that. I need you to know that what you're saying triggers me because 1, 2, 3. And I also directed it to the Palestinians that we don't say this.
And I will ask you, don't you think that what you said would trigger them as well?
Because it should be both ways.
It's both ways. If that feeling is triggering you, I'm sure that what you said triggers them.
It did. I'm sure it did.
Because, that's, for me, it needs to be both sides. Like, we need to touch each other's buttons in a way, not to piss each other off, but just to hit that point where they can understand what I feel, but I need to show that I'm trying to understand what they feel. Because I have friends that've been called for reserves. Like, there's nothing you can do about that. That's the reality. And of course, I'm worried about them. And and some of them are older people who have family and kids. And in their eye, I'm protecting my country. In their eye, I'm not going to wipe out Gaza. Like, I'm, on the call of duty in this conflict. We were attacked, and I need to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's how their eye look at it, and I need to grasp it.
Especially people that are from Sderot, from people from the locations that were specifically targeted, from the people that are now displaced.
Literally, I think it's everyone, because you can have anyone from this country who could have been affected. It's north, south from that supernova party. It touched every corner of the country. So the feeling exists in so many people in so many different ways, and so many different people in that sense that, they don't come from the same ideology perspective. Some from the right, some from the left, some from the big cities, some from kibbutzim, but they all went with the same, we need to protect our home. Like, that's how they looked at it. And I understand that, but they also need to understand where we come from. They need to understand our complexity. And the thing is, particularly for Palestinian Israelis, I don't think that's the reality today. But it's also understandable, because the Jewish population in particular is in trauma.
Yeah.
So we feel, as the Arab community here in Israel, because we work together, we live together, and we're in such so many public spaces we share, and even private spaces and work and stuff, and there's a feeling that you can't say what you want, because there's a feeling of anger, of even vengeance on particularly from the Jewish citizens. And when you feel you can't talk about even about the humanitarian aspects, and we hear it about cases of people getting fired from work, not for saying they support Hamas, for saying, there are kids and children and innocent people there.
For asking for a ceasefire. And it's not because it's, we have two issues. We have the legality issue, and things are being monitored. So people are afraid to post things online.
You can even get arrested for likes
Yeah.
now. But the other issue is not a legal issue. It's more a social issue, because you could get fired because your colleagues would demand that you get fired. It's not because it's illegal what you said, but it's because they don't want to be around you with your views. So, and there's a feeling that also the Jewish side can say whatever it wants. In that feeling of anger, we saw it in Netanya with the college being stormed at the Arab students and calling death for Arabs.
Yeah.
In front of the police. The police was in front of those, the people who were rioted in front of the college, calling death for Arabs. No one got arrested. No one was blamed for hate speech. But Arabs did get arrested for hate speech. And that's the inequality. And we feel like we need to be the grown-up in the room, literally. Like, we're the grown-up in this situation. We have our peers who are frustrated, angry. They're feeling a vengeance. We need to absorb it. Absorb everything that they're feeling, including the very tough things that they could say. And we need to just be silent and accept that that's going to happen. And we need to be the mature ones in this scenario.
We interrupt this episode to express our heartfelt gratitude to our supporters and our Patreon members. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this is a reminder that if you join our Patreon community, you will have access to exclusive content, and you will be the first to know when we have something going on in your city. So that is your reminder to join the Patreon, and you can do it with the link in our description. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it a lot. Even on a governmental level, you have, what's his name? Ayman Ode, that came out with the message of, like, it was so funny. He came out with the message of to the Arab community, to the Arab Palestinian Israeli community. He was like, I'm so proud of you. We're so responsible. What? As like, we have a responsibility. We have a duty of not to go to extremism. And no, yes, I do, like, that's one end. Then on the other end, you have of us taking responsibility, and you have the other end of someone like Sami Abu Shhadeh, who attempted to organize a march or a demonstration to demand a ceasefire, and he was arrested. Now, I'm not going to go into details, and I don't even want to. Let's say that he is labeled as a terror sympathizer. Sababa? Let's say that he is. And he gets arrested. On the parallel end, you have an Israeli, I forgot his name, in the government that asked to nuke Gaza.
Yeah. We had that last week, yes.
Tab, arrest him.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And we feel that it's only one side that can speak at the moment. There's no fairness. We're in time of war.
Mm-hmm.
I think in general, life is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
We always look for fair because that's a human tendency, but life is not fair. War is not fair. And I agree with Ayman Ode on that particular sentence of, I'm glad that we're being responsible, because it will bite us. Yes. It will bite us in the ass at the end, because we are the ones who live together with our Jewish peers. And when you hear from my friend who is right now, in Gaza Strip, who told me about some of the feelings that he heard from soldiers around him, from different political affiliations and different communities in Israel, north and south, cities and kibbutzim, and talking about killing Arabs, not Hamas, not Palestinians, Arabs. That hate has gone to a vengeance place that became dangerous, in my opinion. But these people are going to come back from this war with post-trauma from the war, from a lot of difficult things that they experienced, saw, and they're going to come and back to live with us in the regular in a regular life. And how do we do that? How do they not look at us suspiciously? How do they not hear Arabic and be afraid? Because regular citizen right now, if you're in one of the mixed cities and they hear Arab, or majority Jewish city, and they hear Arabic, I saw people look at me. And it wasn't a look of hate. It was more, honestly, a look of fear. but I don't know when that look of fear will turn to a look of hate.
Yeah.
And that's
Or
the scary,
vengeance.
and vengeance. That's a scary part for me as a citizen, as someone who lives in a mixed city, and you know, I'm around Jewish people all the time, and I don't want to be afraid, you know. And people don't understand that we're also afraid. I think that's a problem on the other side, that people are surprised that we're also afraid. I remember it from the May 21 clashes. I told my friends, I'm not going to work. They were like, really? Why? I'm like, there are clashes. There are attempts of lynches. They're like, yeah, but it's only on Arabs. I'm like, excuse me? There were attempt lynches against Arabs as well. What are you talking about? There was a community next to where I live that they stopped cars and investigated whether people are Arabs or not. But that's part of the problem, is that you are only being targeted. And you don't understand that the other side also gets targeted, that the other side also suffers like you do. And without understanding each other's experiences and the fact that we're all afraid, that we share the same feelings and emotions, maybe that will get us closer.
I'll bring up the fact that I said before, that we look alike. Like
Each
when I walk in the street, I always, like before, when there's not tension, I'm stopped and people ask me, "At Farsiya, are you Persian?" And they assume Persian Jew. And when in these situations, I can go for an Arab, I can pass as a Jew also. So I feel like I have a target on my back by both, because I can be accidentally killed by an Arab and accidentally be killed by a Jew.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with my beard. Like, shave it or not? Like, what would look more or less scary to people? I haven't decided yet.
And on the other end, I have a friend of mine that looks Arab, because she wears a headscarf, and during a siren, she wasn't let in a shelter. Yes. She wasn't let in a shelter. And this isn't in some traditional place. This is in the center I'm talking about.
Wow.
We talk a lot about understanding, and I'm going to say something that's going to switch us to the next point that we're going to talk about. We can understand, and we have understood for the past decades. What we need is a account of responsibility from the Israelis and from the Palestinians. What we lack is no one's taking responsibility for everything. Not the Israelis, not the Palestinians. And what do we do about it?
What we do about it, we need solutions.
Yeah.
We have a conflict, and we need actual tangible solutions in order to move forward. And I think it's exactly what you're saying. Like, everybody understands the problems, and no one is bringing real solutions to the table, and no one is implementing them either. I think that's the issue. Because the situation in Gaza right now is, we have the war, and the war will end at some point. At the end of the war, all of the estimates show that it's going to be inevitable, that the Israeli military will be the one that controls Gaza in the beginning. It's inevitable. But the question remains, what happens after that?
And for how long?
And for how, how long, God knows. But the question is it going to be indefinite or not? Are we turning Gaza to West Bank too? Because let me tell you, you know that more than I do, that experiment, quote unquote, in the West Bank failed. Having that reality in the West Bank is not a good reality. It's a failing one. And it pushes us farther from each other. And at the end of the day, somebody needs to take control over Gaza. And the question is who? The only, real prime candidate is the Palestinian Authority. It's the one that is in charge of the Palestinian lives. It's the one that controlled also both West Bank and Gaza before the split in 2007. And you can check more about that in our previous episode. But the Palestinian Authority, as we also mentioned, is corrupt. If you want a real entity to take control over Gaza, it needs to be one that is by the people or for the people. The feeling of the people, also just in the West Bank, not even looking at the Gaza Strip, that the PA doesn't work for the grievances of the people in the West Bank. It doesn't address their needs, and it's only there solely for its own power to strengthen and maintain its own position. They get all the money, support from the world, internationally, national community, and none of the responsibility because we're under occupation. It's a very convenient place to be, and the West and the PA is comfortable to stay in it. So, and the people recognize that. The people recognize the corruption. So we need something different. And in order to get something different, we need real effort of the international community, not just to wake up when the war in Gaza happening, and then when the war is over, they'll go back to dormant mode. It doesn't work like that. Because the international community is the one that supports the PA. It's the one that give it that money that it's so comfortable of having and not pursuing real changes. I'm sorry, that money needs to be allocated to real things. If the PA fails to do so, the international community needs to pressure the new election, maybe not even elections. Like we talked about the issue of maybe elections is not great for the Palestinian community right now, but a different way of looking at younger leadership that would take the Palestinian people forward. So that's on the Palestinian side. And then you have the Israeli side. On the Israeli side, as you know, we are in the middle of a war, but at the end of the war, there will be questions asked. There'll be questions asked of the current government. And there's the question whether or not Netanyahu will remain prime minister after this war.
I don't think there should even be a question. Like, why is there even going to be a question?
Because some people have experienced enough with Netanyahu that every time you feel that he's going to be gone, somehow he, flicks his magic wand and he wins elections. He's a mastermind of politics. And people are aware of his ability to manipulate the masses and to bring people to his side. He's already, putting the blame on the army, putting the blame on the Mossad, on the Shabak, on whoever he can, just not putting his responsibility on himself. So I don't know what will happen, but the short term is that the Israeli public needs to address the first questions of, is this really working? We've tried the aggression part and, not having terror by beating down your enemy. It didn't work. So on the short term in the Israeli public, these questions need to be raised. What's the way forward? Are we going to continue that rhetoric that the right wing under Bibi have kept for so long of, we need to be the strong aggressors, but also allowing Hamas to continue and flourish? There needs to be a change in the Israeli society in general, because like we said before, they felt like they live in peace. And I think that's the biggest problem in Israel. People thought we live in peace before the war. I'm sorry, we don't. You can't, feel that you live in peace just because you have people stuck behind a wall and you are far away from them. That wall will break. That wall will be torn down. It's not forever, and people will fight.
And people will continue to die.
And people will continue to die. So the Israeli public needs to check itself. Is this, and even as a Jewish people, is this what the Jewish people really want? Is this the aspiration after all the suffering? Is to live in a situation where you have conflict every few months? No. You deserve better. We deserve better. And we should be pushing for better, because it's either going to go after this war to an extreme of radicalism, or it will go to a place where people will say, listen, this is the last straw. We're desperate now. If maybe that feeling of desperation will be the one that changes things.
Khalas, we've had enough.
Khalas, we've had enough. So maybe that will be it. What do you think? What's the short-term things that we can do aside from the political aspect? So we touched on the political issue of, who controls what and where the two entities need to go. But the question is, how do we make sure that the public itself also believes in this message? What are the short-term things that we can work on in order to achieve it?
I would be lying to you if I told you that I have a short-term plan that will fix things temporarily, but I will tell you that this mindset of developing a short-term plan is what has maintained us. Because everything we see right now, whether it's East Jerusalem, whether it's the Golan Heights, whether it's the situation of Hamas, it's all temporary. That's the mindset that we're put in by politicians, by like everything is for the day after, for the next day, for, and we never get to that day. So I think leave the short term to the politicians because they're great at that. We need the long term. We need the actual foundation, a concrete base that we can actually build on.
I agree. Like I said, like, everything that I mentioned on the short term, it's all on the political aspects of, what happens to Gaza politically, who controls it, who does what tactically. But like you're saying, in order to fix the problem, it's not just who controls Gaza tomorrow morning. It's how the Palestinian people work towards a two-state solution, and how are the Israeli people work towards a peace, two-state solution. How both sides will see that this is the only way to go, and for that we need long-term actions. In order
So
how
do you think we start with the long-term solutions?
I think the first thing that we really need to do is to work on the relations inside Israel. I wouldn't start working with Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem yet.
Wow, I completely disagree with you. Continue.
Not a problem. What I think and what I see is that we, as a population that is both, we're both Palestinians and Israeli, and even inside this country, where every fifth person is Arab, at the very best, as communities, at the very best, we're good neighbors, not good friends. Good neighbors. As communities, not as people. On the individual level, there are great relationships between people. But as communities, we don't live together truly. How many people have visited on Passover? How many Jews went to a Ramadan dinner, iftar? How many people did Sukkot? How many people did Eid? Not many. I try to do it myself. I try to invite my friends and go to their holidays. But how many people have actually done it on a really, a mass scale? And we live together, for Christ's sakes. So how can we expect an Israeli Jewish and a Palestinian from the West Bank to see a little bit eye to eye when we're not even doing it inside Israel yet so well enough? Like, there's such a long way to go in order to first break that stigma of Arab in the first place. Like, get to know the Arab that's next to you before you know the one that's across the street. First, let's get to know each other inside, exposed to what is Arab, the religious aspects, and then people won't be afraid of these others. And we go back to the issue of language. Again, that's one of the long-term initiatives that will bring real change. Because if I see that you're also making an effort to speak my language, that means that you as a state is making an effort for me as the 20%.
I think you're looking at it from a, and don't take this the wrong way, from a 48 Arab perspective.
Oh, 1000%.
I think, like, I completely disagree with you. I think, like I said before, responsibility. Every Israelis and Palestinians need to go to the corner and think about it. Think about what they've done. Work on themselves. We need to work, us as Palestinians, we need to work on our terminology. We need to work on what we want. The radicals and the ones that want peace. The radicals also don't have a long-term plan. Like, okay, let's say Hamas, let's say theoretically that the Hamas plan was the plan to go. After that, what's next? What happens next? And on the peace building process, what's next? Are we just gonna go program after program after program? What's next until we inspire all our Palestinians to go study in the States and in the UK? Is that what we want? We need to work on each other's communities. Same goes for the Israelis, especially right now, because radicalism, racism, discrimination, Islamophobia is on the rise inside of Israel. I think I would say more than the rest of the world. Anti-Semitism in the rest of the world, Islamophobia is on a peak here. So I think Palestinians, we need, even like what you said is very crucial. The Palestinian Israeli citizens are very vital because, like we said before, we're the link. But how can we link two people that don't want to link?
I will tell you, and this is where I think, and this goes back to how I'm seeing it. While both communities need to check themselves, and the Palestinian community needs to answer its own questions in the West Bank, in Gaza, and East Jerusalem, they need to answer those questions. on their own, like you say. But we don't need to do those as Arab 48. We have a different role to play.
We always need to do it because we're using their terminology.
1000%. But I think here in particular, it needs to be a mutual work, us and them.
Yes.
Arab 48 with the rest of the Israeli population. So, because here's where I like, when you have two separate communities and they all live separately from each other, yes, you can go and remain in your own box and think about what you did, and they can think about what they did. But both sides live together here. So there's not really pushing, like, let's stick to our own corners. Like, on every day you might interact with Israeli, where you can really in the West Bank.
That's your reality.
You can, like, but even if you're a worker from a village in the north and you take your truck and you drive to, like, just a pickup work, you'll meet 5-10 Israelis on that day. You will. Some place or another, either the receiving or on the way, or in a shop or in the gas station, in any place we meet. And what I think is there's a lack of trust between Israelis and Palestinians, right? Like, that's part of the problem. We don't trust each other to do a peace process. But how can we develop trust between Israelis and Palestinians who are there when we don't have trust inside the country? There is a lack of trust between Arabs and Jews inside Israel. So I don't see how we can eliminate that distrust with someone who's Palestinian, who's so foreign to a Jewish Israeli eye, if we're not even there yet inside Israel between Arabs and Jews. If we didn't break yet these feelings of distrust. Because like you said, how do we convince the Palestinians? We do it. Because we feel distrust with the state. And that's something that someone from Jerusalem and West Bank sees. And we lived with, like they would see, look at 48. They live with them and they don't trust them and they don't trust each other. So what do you want from us? But if we tell East Jerusalem and West Bank, only after real changes and tangible changes from the state towards us, to show that there's a trust, we can convey that feeling to the rest of the Palestinian people. We can push it in government. We can push it in the parliament. We can talk to the people. We can bring those voices and say, hey, there's a change going on inside Israel. For instance, one of the first things that need to be done in the long-term things, and we mentioned it before, is recognition. Arab 48 needs to be recognized as Palestinian people. Israelis and Palestinians. If you do that, we will feel closer to the state and we'll feel trust that they accept us for who we are as Palestinians and Israelis. I will tell my Palestinian peers, hey, things are changing around here. They're starting to understand. I will convey that to you. That's how I see it. How do you see it?
I think I've talked about this like, even when we present our identities, Ibrahim, even as citizens of the state, like I don't want to even include myself, because when people look at me, when people hear my accent, know that I'm from East Jerusalem, they see me as Palestinian. They see you as Arab.
Yes.
And even with that discrimination, it's better than being Palestinian in their eyes. Like, I look at the comments at the articles that I've written in English. The very first comments that pop up is, "Get over yourself. You're Arab. You're not Palestinian." En davar kaze. There's no such thing as Palestinian.
That's why I think recognition needs to start with the people inside Israel.
But that means the people inside Israel need to do their own internal work, and the people of Palestine need to do their own internal work.
But we live with them. I understand what you're saying. Okay, like, sure, both sides need to be on, in their community and trying to understand what they did wrong and try to, like, look at how we can improve and how we change things. On the Israeli side, from my experience and from the things that I've seen in my life here in Israel, I see the problem. And the problem is in the definition. What is a Palestinian? What is Palestine? What is Palestinian to an Israeli? And for an Israeli, the word Palestinian is a national movement. It's a vision for a state that replaces Israel. It's not a peoplehood. It's a political national identity that is only political. And it's only for a specific way of forming that political entity. It's Palestine instead of Israel. And this is why an Israeli would hear the word Palestinian will be afraid. I do, part of the work that I do is also talking to people that come to Israel, and specifically parliamentary from Europe and from the Congress, and try to shed light on our community. What is a Palestinian Israeli, and that mix of identity, and trying to put my community forth. And then I realized from also tour guides that would bring these delegations that they were very, maybe even surprised by how I present a Palestinian. And then I realized that maybe I need to actually also talk to Jewish communities. And there I didn't want to go to the echo chamber. I went and talked to Jewish communities, including religious ones. And I remember in every single one of these conversations, they would come to me and say, wow, I never heard somebody explain a Palestinian in that way. Why wasn't I taught in that manner? Why wasn't I taught that it's a culture, that it's a peoplehood? I always thought about it as a terror movement, as a movement to replace my country with a different country. The state is not going to wake up one day and tell its citizens, hey, this is what a Palestinian is. It's not what we thought all the years. No, it's going to have to come from this exchange of cultures. Is us as a community put forth our identity as a peoplehood, putting it in government, pushing it in parliament, doing advocacy in order to showcase what a Palestinian is, different from what they think a Palestinian is, because the problem is what they think it is. And we need to change that rhetoric. And if we're on our own, I don't see them changing without us making that change, without us illuminating something about Palestinian identity that is outside of what they know.
I see what you're saying, and don't misinterpret what I said of us working separately as only working separately. I think all of it should be working simultaneously, both us separately and together, because one can't work without the other, because we have been working only on the joint stuff and it has turned into fluffy work. To be honest, it has turned into fluffy events and programs just to fulfill a dream of donors and of grants.
That's why I think it needs to be grassroots work.
Yes, but I will say that the government, before this radical government of Netanyahu, beforehand, it was the first time an Arab Israeli joined the coalition.
Correct.
We also had our second Muslim minister entirely, and I will quote him. I worked in the Ministry of Regional, or volunteered in the Ministry of Regional Cooperation under Isawi Frege, and his quote was, Israel is my country and Palestine is my, and Palestinians are my people. So here you have it. You have an Arab party in the coalition. You have a minister talking and speaking in the name of Palestinian as a peoplehood. And what did we get as a response? Of a fascist, extremist, right-wing government. So it can't be just. I agree with you. We have the responsibility to do what you just described, to illuminate. I really like this word, to illuminate the Israeli public. But it can't be just us. Like, honestly, cut us some slack. Cut us some slack. Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and everything that 48, Nakba, Nakse. Cut us some slack. We can't keep on illuminating on, oh, I'm not a terrorist. We can't keep on doing that. Wait, we can't keep on doing that, but we continue to do so. I can't even, like, on taxi rides, how many people I refused to leave because they would ask me, oh, where are you from? And I would say Jerusalem, and they would describe their West Jerusalem utopia that they know of, Yerushalayim. And then I would say, oh, no, that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about East Jerusalem, and this is my reality. And then he would say, oh, so you're Palestinian. I was like, yeah, I'm a Palestinian Israeli. And then I would be presented with a discussion of identity, of them negating my identity. And I would spend so much time explaining and defending on how Palestinian identity is a peoplehood. And it's exhausting.
But you know where it comes?
There needs to be a willingness, Ibrahim. There needs to be a willingness from the Israeli society to see us and talk to us as Palestinians.
Agreed. But like I said, it's recognition. I meant formal recognition. When I say formal recognition of a people, it needs to come from the government. Meaning that, yes, me, you, everyone is doing their advocacy work to change stereotypes. I mean, that's the reality. We're the minority. we're in the tough situation. The majority can continue to live comfortably without, whether or not you make a difference in their view of what Arab is or not. It's not going to change his life. It's not going to make his life less, worse or better. But for us, it will make life better. For us, it will mean a lot more, a big difference. And it needs to be in two ways. One, in the grassroots, for sure. And that's the tougher part. I don't neglect of how difficult that is. But the second part is what you're saying, is that needs to kind of eliminate these questions of what a Palestinian is with a formal recognition from the state that we have a 20% of the population. They're Israeli citizens, 21, 22, about 2 million today. They're every fifth person in this country. They are a people. They come from a separate people. They come from the Palestinian people. They're part of that peoplehood. But they're also part of us. And we're going to accept their identity as it is on a peoplehood level, not on a national aspiration. A Palestinian as a peoplehood, not as a national movement. Not that I'm saying I'm Palestinian means I don't want this country I want this country to be eliminated tomorrow morning. But that needs to happen. I agree. It's really difficult. And it needs a new leadership in government. Don't get me wrong. But maybe that will happen now with this shock that we got, from this approach of right wing that, lock Gaza and put a block on it. And all we do is strike. And we need to make sure they never raise their heads again. That doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And they, like you're saying, and I agree on that aspect, that the Israeli public needs to check itself in order to get new leaders. But those new leaders cannot bring these ideas to the Israeli public without an Arab partner in Israel, without a political leadership that it's an Arab. Because let's be also realistic. Our political leadership, maybe aside from Mansour Abbas, haven't been explicit about we want two states and we live in Israel and this is the state. It's a Jewish democracy. We have issues with the Jewish elements because we're not Jewish. But what we will do is strengthen the democratic element. We will strengthen the second pillar. But no, the majority of the political parties have been just, black and white approach about it. We don't accept the state and how it's done. It's, it's also not very clear on we want it two states.
It's like a victim card.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, that doesn't help. That doesn't help us. That doesn't work. And let's just put it even more. We as Palestinian Israeli citizens, we don't vote enough. And then we say we don't have democracy. Okay, there are a lot of things where we are discriminated. A lot of things that we need to change the reality. But they're not going to do it alone.
I think we can agree to disagree on that one, because I'll bring the other fact of, like I said, we need to sit with each other and decide what we want.
Exactly. That I 1000% agree. Because we as a Palestinian people, we didn't decide what we want.
What we don't vote because we don't recognize this as an Israeli state. No, okay, وبعدين, what's going to happen? So
I
agree to disagree. At least we agree that it has to all happen simultaneously.
It's all of these things. Yes. It's the element of political activism, is social activism. It's us making our own decisions what we want and also influencing the other side. I think because we're the minority or the weaker side in the equation. Even if you look at the political structure, why would Israel as a state want to give up parts of the land? If you're stronger, if you control, why would you strategically? The only reason that you could is because you would understand that this is not giving up. This is giving in order to get.
Yeah.
You're giving, not giving up the land. You're allowing the other side to get more of the land in order to secure your own peace at the same time. And that needs to change. And I agree. All these things need to happen together. But I do see a specific role for the Arab citizens of Israel in that regard. Because we live with them.
Yeah.
We can change their hearts and minds more directly. A Palestinian in the West Bank doesn't have that interaction to change a heart and mind.
Again, I feel like you're putting a lot of pressure on the Israelis and the Palestinian Israeli citizens.
Yeah. We're putting absolutely. Listen, we have a responsibility. We're the only ones who have Israeli citizenship. If we're not going to stand up for this, who is? We have more pressure than others. So what?
I think that the same amount of pressure should be amplified on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. But I feel like when you talk, you neglect the stress that needs to be put on a Jewish Israeli as
No,
well.
there needs to be. I just think strategically looking at it, they won't see the benefit of it because they're the stronger side
Not
of this
only
equation.
that, not only that.
Why would they?
It's yes. Why would they? And not that there is no. Not only that there is no benefit. There's also kind of a loss because when you recognize, you can't recognize the being Palestinian as a peoplehood without recognizing the Nakba. You can't without recognizing.
What do you mean? They need to recognize the Nakba.
Not just like forget politically.
No, they need to recognize it.
I'm talking about the people themselves.
Absolutely.
How because it kind of negates their independence.
I disagree with that. We had a war.
And they don't want
It's over.
They don't want to know about it.
It happened.
They don't want to know about the Nakba people and the Nakba people. Even Israelis even disregard that it even happened.
On a people level, yes, but if you recognize it in politically recognize Palestinian identity, that will include teaching. And I think you're hitting a very important aspect: is that we need to learn about each other's histories.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
Let's put it this way, we're not taught enough about, Jewish history, except from, and by the way, Holocaust, we learn it very tactically in a way, like, this happened and that happened.
And that happened.
And that happened. Yeah. Exactly. Like, it's very practical learning of understanding what happened. And it's not understanding the feelings and the situation these people were in. And the same vice versa. We both need to be educated on each other, but they're not going to learn about Nakba without recognizing that we're a people.
Mm-hmm.
So
but it comes hand in hand.
It needs to be formally recognized.
The Palestinians without recognizing the.
No, you'll recognize together. But I'm saying in terms of educating about it. Is after you recognize it, that gives it the legitimacy to be taught, because it's accepted as a formal thing in the state. Which, by the way, we need to do the same. We need to learn more about Jewish history. I read the book Night by Eli Wiesel about the Holocaust, and it was his journal. It's one of the most powerful books I've ever read. But I only was exposed to it because I learned it when I went to the US in high school for an exchange year, and it was mandatory there. Why isn't it mandatory here? By the way, Jewish kids in Israel know about this book. They learn it, Laila. They learn it in Hebrew. Why don't we get this book? Why don't they get books about our experience? There are so many powerful things that they can learn. They can learn about Mahmoud Darwish. Mm-hmm. Mahmoud Darwish, the national Palestinian poet, for those who don't know, was dating a Jewish woman.
Yeah.
And it's a shock. And her code name in his famous poem was Rita. And it's a song. You can look it up on YouTube. One of the most beautiful songs you'll ever read. Between Rita and my eyes, there is a rifle. Mm-hmm. Even the nationalist, the national poet of the Palestinian people, fell in love and dated a Jew for 2 years. Like, how are we both not taught about that? How are both sides not taught about that? Not looking at Mahmoud Darwish as, this nationalist guy who was against Israel. Like, come on. Life is more complex than this. And both of us, we need to be taught about these complexities.
I think we can go on and on for days about how politically, on a governmental level, both in the PA and the Israeli government, how everyone needs to retire, basically. Everyone needs to
change them all.
Like, everyone needs to throw in the towel. Like,
خلاص بكفي.
خلاص بكفي. And we can talk on and on about the education system and how the education system in Palestine and in Israel needs to be changed, added to, and just like rip the books and start from scratch. Really, like, why are we learning about, yes, let's highlight the suffering of our ancestors. Let's focus on the hope that we need to build the future for us and for the next generation. But I raised something that people honestly don't talk about enough: religious leaders, imams, like sheikhs, priests, and rabbis. I'm talking as a Muslim, the first place where you start to learn, even before you go to school, is khutbat al-Jum'ah, Friday prayer.
Wow, that's so religious.
That's Friday prayer. I'm being serious. Like, we can talk fluff about about day-to-day life. We can talk a lot about education and this and that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to
Khutbah al-Jum'ah, just for those who don't know, it's on the Friday Muslim prayer. The noon prayer is a longer prayer where there is also a speech by the Imam in the mosque where he gives basically a tutoring and a religious education for 45 minutes, where he gives a lecture on a specific topic that he chose for the day. So that's what Khutbah al-Jum'ah means.
Thank you for the for the elaboration.
Some of our, listeners don't even know what that is.
So I think we should start there, or not even start there. We should implement that in our solution. Why are we not? We're in the Holy Land? Why aren't we going to the? And I'm talking as a liberal. We're in the Holy Land. Why are we not talking to the religious people? People come here. People want this place in the name of religion. Why aren't we using religion to direct us towards peace?
You want my answer? Because religion, and that's like the hardcore secular in me talking, and that's why I never, honestly, I never thought of the religious aspect, and that's an important point. It's not something that crosses my mind when I think of the strategic things about solutions, because I'm not religious, but it's important to remember that a lot of people are.
Most people here are. Even if they're not religious, they're conservative and led by traditions that stem from religion.
But I'm not sure how many are, personally, I don't know, how many are influenced by Khutbah al-Jum'ah. I remember as a kid going to the mosque, I didn't listen to what the Imam said in those 40 minutes. It was just a lot of blabbering that I had no idea what the hell he's talking about. It was more of me wanting to pray, and that's it. I would listen to him in 10 minutes. But the problem of religion, in my opinion, religion has been the cause of war, not the cause of peace. I'm sorry. More people throughout history died because of religion more than anything else. And religion has always been mine versus yours, my God versus your God, even though for a lot of these religions we talk about the same God, but even then they disagree that it's the same God in a way. So
I'm not debating with you.
So how can we use, I'm asking you, how can we use religion? That for me, I always saw it as a tool of war, as a tool of dividing, as a tool of my reality is the one that is right and yours is the one that is false, because I have religious justification for it. And particularly, like you're saying, the Holy Land, holy shit. The two sides are fighting for the same 200 meters square. It's not about the whole land. It's about one specific place where both want their only, their Al-Aqsa Mosque and Temple Mount on the same little piece of land. And if you ask a secular like me, build them next to each other and have people go into each one and pray and salamat. But they don't look at it that way. Religious people don't look at it that way. It's either mine or yours.
Again, I'm not talking about something so complex as Al-Aqsa and the Temple Mount. I'm not saying, let's bring a priest, a sheikh, and a rabbi and let them sing kumbaya. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a big, you're saying that religion leads to war. Religion is the cause for violence, and war, or might be taken...
A justification.
A justification. Okay, fine. Then, are religion the same as Palestinians are going anywhere and Israelis aren't going anywhere? Religion ain't leaving anytime soon. It's here to stay.
Unfortunately. I'm kidding.
It's here to stay. And we can't remove it. Let's recruit it. Let's recruit it to our own benefit. Let imams forget about peace. We're talking a lot about peace in our beginning, in our pilot. You even said peace isn't about doves flying around Tel Aviv and Ramallah. We're not talking about that.
Don't quote me, please.
I will quote you and tell you that what you're talking about isn't just to reference my point. Peace isn't about actually being friends. We don't need to be friends in the beginning. For me, I'd love us to be friends. I would love to sing kumbaya.
I agree with you.
But since the source that you're claiming, that the source is religion, from both sides, all in the name of this land that we're fighting for, let's use these religious leaders. Who qualifies them? I really have to ask, who the hell says that, okay, yalla, you're certified, please come give a course, a 45-minute lecture to billions of people that are going to take your word as the Quran and the Bible and whatever. Let's use these people that have so much credibility. We're talking about building civil society. It's not, I'm sorry to hit it for you, but especially in Palestine, it's not going to be liberals. that
That I
build
know.
civil society.
That I know.
It's not going to be liberals.
That I know.
It's going to be people from within that speak the same language,
West
speak
Bank,
the same
1000%.
terminology. It's going to be them. How do we empower them? In my opinion, how do we build this civil society? It's through religion, through religious leaders, actual religious. Tongue twister. Actual religious leaders that want the society to prosper, and they can tiptoe around the occupation and normalization and whatever, but at the end of the day, if we want the own society to prosper as separately, and for actual the youth to focus on their years of youth, it starts in mosques, it starts in churches. That's where it starts.
Okay, then I'll bring you I'll join your camp. Let's just put it this way for a little bit. I've never used or looked at the religion as the tool that I would use, but like now thinking about what you're saying, we need actual examples that will show the connection of both,
yes,
or show connection of different things. Here's one example that comes to mind, like just out of the top of my head, the Rambam. The Rambam is one of the historical religious scholars, one of the biggest Jewish religious scholars. And a lot of the Jewish education today is based on a lot of his teachings and a lot of the things that he wrote. He wrote in Arabic. He wrote Jewish texts were written by him in Arabic. That connection should be made. That it's not Judaism alone from Arabs. And also bringing how the both faiths are so similar. But then I'll ask you another element. Where do the Christians go with this?
What do you mean where the Christians go with this?
Because if you do comparison of religion,
it's not comparison.
It's not comparison. If you do attempt to put, not compare, but try to show similarities. There are so many between Islam and Judaism. But there are also contradictions. But there are even more similarities, in my opinion, than contradictions in those two faiths. But I think between Judaism and Christianity, there's more differences than similarities.
I'm not talking about bringing the religious people together. I'm talking, again, to when I said all go to the corner. That's how we reflect, that's how we build. I'm talking about as a Palestinian by myself.
To reflect with your religious leader.
Yes, to reflect with my religious leader. I remember my cousins each and every Friday, from the youngest to the eldest, all going to either Al-Aqsa or the closest mosque that they can go and listen to a Friday prayer. And they listen to that lecture more than they listen in schools, because they're pressured to go. And in some cases, when the family is even religious, they'll be asked and we'll discuss it at home. Again, I'm not talking about a priest, a sheikh, and a rabbi coming together or comparing religions or anything. I'm talking as a Palestinian within my own society to look up to our religious leaders. I remember my cousins during Friday prayer being like pressured more than going and studying for school to attend Friday prayers. It's extremely important. And if we can if we can grow actual good values that can lead us one day to an actual democratic state on both sides, it's in religion. That's where it's going to start, or at least similar or equal, or to build tolerance and acceptance, and to actually get to a point where one side accepts of the other. It needs to start with religion, because religion, to quote you, got us into this mess.
Sure, let's try to see if we can. I've never gone on the religious aspect, and I do hope that anything that we can do can make a change and bring a change for the good. But there was that one question that you mentioned, is who chooses them, and that's part of the problem. Is that we know that some of the religious education is used to teach hate. We know that they use religious justification to hate one side or the other.
And monitoring. Why does no one look at what they're doing?
So the question, maybe the issue is monitoring that a lot more, and making sure that we don't have, so-called religious scholars who are bringing hate, when religion is supposed to bring,
love, unity, forgiveness.
Sure.
Supposed to. I'm saying supposed to. You can say whatever you want about religion. I have my own connection to my religion. And it's also embedded in identity, like we talked about
absolutely.
second episode.
And like you said, I agree that, we need to try everything in all the different ways that we can make a change. And if religion can be used for good, by all means. It's just the problem so far has been that we have specific, and we know that there are certain religious leaders who use some, justification from religious texts, that they would use one little paragraph or one little sentence and not even add the rest of it, and show how that is legitimate in order to promote hate. So that also exists among religious leaders. So maybe the problem is monitoring and try to understand who should be real religious leaders. Someone who's teaching hate, I don't understand how that can be a religious leader. Religion, at least, at the inception is to promote peace and love and all these things, which I don't think it does at the end of the day. But, that's a whole different argument. We can talk about religion all day. But all these things need to come together in order to make change. It needs to be all the things that we mentioned: recognition, education, formal and religious, language, and understanding and thinking on our own, each side to what they need to change. And and we need top to bottom and bottom up approaches working simultaneously in order to see real changes happening. But all of these need obviously the right leadership. It needs a leadership that is willing to put itself out there and risk it all in order to have something better. And maybe that leadership can come from here. And I don't know, maybe it'll come from the Arab citizens of Israel, the Palestinian Israelis, because we're the only ones who are both. So if anyone should be making a peace deal, it should be us, in my opinion.
Okay, Ibrahim, I just looked at the clock, and for everyone or anyone who's listening up until now, thank you so much. We have been talking for more than an hour and a half, and we didn't even realize, and therefore, unfortunately, we're going to have to skip the 2 segments of terminology and fact-checking, but we haven't. We're doing so mindfully, we know, but we think that we covered very important points and aspects that we want to pass on to our listeners, and so we'll have to delve into it next time when we plan to actually talk about discrimination and a shit ton of terminology and
racism, discrimination, yes, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, all these hot topics will be discussed next time. And that's all terminology and fact-checking. So we'll delve into that fast for sure.
But Ibrahim, I want you to look into the camera and actually tell our listeners, what's the actual solution?
Once I'm prime minister and Amira as my deputy, we'll make a change. That I think that's, once you do that, we'll make a change in this world.
First of all, I'll be prime minister and you will be my deputy. Second of all, that's never going to happen.
Why? I mean, first of all, I don't mind. By all means, you be the prime minister. I would love to be your deputy. I would love to advise you on the right things. You've got the character, so you go for it. I don't mind. But, I always say that joke. Once I'm prime minister, I'll fix everything. But just put the keys in my hand and I'll show you that it's actually possible.
Realistically, I don't think that that's ever going to happen. Right? Like a Palestinian, what Jewish Zionist Israeli person wants to make a Palestinian, even if he's a citizen or she is a citizen of Israel?
What about Black Americans?
They had one black president. Can you tell me about a Native American president?
So first of all, one first black president is the first step. And
how long did it
happen
take
after
them?
250 years, maybe?
Oh, nothing. We're
75
it's
200 years
there.
Yeah, but we have, the expansions of media, of network, all of these things is much rapid than before. The exposure of the other is much bigger than what they had. And I think, even though our case is completely different than the case of Black Americans, there's one thing that I would like to look at, and I do look at, is that Barack Obama became president after 200 years prior to that. Blacks weren't the enemy. It's not like the situation we have here. When you look at an enemy, he's on an equal footing in a way. He's the adversary. And in the US, white people looked at Black people as less than a human. They weren't even looked at as human beings. And from that position of not even recognize them as humans to reach the position of people voting for them, yes, I'm sorry, things can change.
Things can change, but again,
people can do it.
But again, they weren't threatened by them for land purposes, which is the situation that is right here.
1,000%. Our situation is different.
Again, there is no Native, there has never been a Native American.
Yeah, but it's only been the first, non-white. We started with something. We started with black. And black is a big community, actually. It's not like the Native. The Native is it's like having a Druze prime minister in Israel where they're like almost like less than 2%. Which is similar to how we would perceive Native. But every fifth person in Israel is Arab. We're not a small minority. And I think that if somebody brings in the right rhetoric, and I don't think that he can do it, by the way, in an all-Arab party. I think that's important to say. It has to be a mixed party. The biggest problem that we have in the political system is that we have Jewish parties, Arab parties. We have one Arab party with the only Jewish guy that they can find in the country who's not Zionist. And on the Jewish parties, we have like Meretz who will find the one guy who would sit with them like Isawi Frej. And these are the outliers. We need to bring people who are sitting not in the outliers. Israelis, Jews and Arabs who are willing to sit in partnership in a party. Not all Jewish with one Arab and one Arab with all Jews. That doesn't work. A real partnership, and why not with an Arab leader if that party has the best interests of all citizens? We can do it. And once you vote for me and Amira, you'll see that things can change. And I do believe in change. I do believe people can make difference. And it won't happen on its own, but you can make people change.
Okay, ya Jama'ah, as you can see, we can go on forever and ever and ever. So again, we would like to thank you for all the love that you've shown us, all the comments and questions that we've received that we will certainly get to. We see them. And
we're actually discussing maybe having an episode
of Q&A.
Q&A, just answering because you have so many questions and real important ones. So
but we're coming. We're getting there. And this was actually a very enjoyable episode, I have to say. We winged it. It was very, very natural. So thank you everyone for coming with us on this journey. And I'll end by saying Amira and Ibrahim for Prime Minister. Okay, see you next time.
See you next time.